Sabrina 2000s comic issue 22. The story starts out with Sabrina trying to catch a baseball that Harvey hit with his bat on the opposing team. I'm guessing something bad will happen to her in the next panel. Is it really realistic that a team of guys is faced against a team of girls when playing baseball? Don't the women's sports teams just play against women? I mean, no one ever thinks about men's sports teams as playing against any women's sports teams. But they can't just be playing the game casually, because Harvey's all dressed up for it. I guess they really like to get all dressed up for baseball. It turns out Sabrina got in trouble, but at least it's not Jem's fault. She tripped over the sprinkler head and sprained her ankle. Chloe calls her aunt with a cell phone in her backpack, and she gets startled when Zelda warps over to her. So she casually uses magic, no problem. Remember this. Fortunately, Zelda apologizes for scaring her. The story seems familiar to me. She says that since Chloe knows they're witches, she didn't think she'd scare her by doing that. Well, she kind of had a reason to be surprised, considering how Sabrina's aunt's pressure to not use magic, and Quigley even nags them not to use magic. So there was a chance that they would have gone there the normal way. Sabrina is told that she'll be in a cast for a few weeks in the summer, and she's upset at the idea of using crutches, and naturally she asks her aunt why they won't just zap her foot back to normal. Their responses come off as them being outright abusive parents who are so obsessed with their not using magic that they're borderline psychotic about it. They care more about enforcing their agenda on her than actually caring about her well-being. It would have been justified if instead they explained that Harvey knows she got injured, so he'd get really suspicious if they can erase his memory of the fact that she got hurt. Not to mention reverse time. So there's no excuse. Any actually loving parent figures would heal their goddamn child if they could. Why the fuck do they respect Mother Nature more than her? They think they'd be fooling around with Mother Nature, but medical spells exist for a reason. And I'm sure that before they discovered medical technology, witches used nothing but those spells, and no one complained. Zelda says that they're trying to raise her as a normal girl, and Quigley would never permit such a thing. That's right, because he cares more about her pretending she's immortal to make him okay with her than his own relative not being in horrible pain and on crutches for weeks on end. It's not like the doctor would find out. He doesn't spy on them. I want them to know how she feels. If this was a well-written story, the writer would be aware of how stupid this is, at least. And the whole point of the story would be building up to the three of them getting just as hurt as her, and then everyone will be magically back to normal. This is screwed up and twisted. If they had enough compassion for their daughter figure, they'd realize what's actually important. This is not a plot that would happen for a witch. If I was her, I'd run away from home. She's got to have better family members to take care of her. In fact, I want to see how her great-grandmother would raise her. At least she respected her when she stood up to her, and actually rewarded her for having a backbone. I bet she wouldn't treat her like this, because she's old, so she'd be more old-fashioned. Witches demonizing magic would definitely be a new thing. If they really loved her, they'd obviously do everything in their power to help her. Sabrina complains after a few days that it's boring sitting around all day doing nothing. Why couldn't Harvey be the one who was injured? If she was open-minded enough to play video games instead of ignoring them because she thinks they're just for guys, like a sexist, she wouldn't really have a problem. You'd think her aunt would at least cast a "she's not in pain" spell. Salem says with a smile that now she knows how he feels. See what I mean about no sympathy? This is supposed to be a kid's comic, but this is insanely dark. Sabrina complains that she wants to be out having fun with her friends. And Salem sarcastically says that with her attitude, she must have so many, blaming her for being upset when she's injured, and has every reason to be upset. No compassion. Chloe tells her that she dropped by to return her aunt's check, the deposit she put on the mountain bike trail ride that she can't go on anymore. I never respected sports because they can get people hurt. Sabrina wouldn't have gotten hurt if she wasn't playing sports. Sabrina screams in rage, and sadly she doesn't just use magic to cure herself right there. She could always create a magical duplicate of herself to cover up her vacation who would still be injured. But that'd be good writing, making her admirably smart, and able to get away with things, like an escapist character is supposed to do. So Chloe leaves without her, and Sabrina grabs the idiot ball by hopping down the stairs in the cellar instead of levitating down it, when she could easily get herself hurt that way. Lucky for her, she doesn't. Salem predicts her screaming for help after using the magic book because he has no faith in her, when there's no logical reason that she would screw up in the slightest bit. Even an ape would do a better job. Even a 5-year-old would be able to imagine their leg being not hurt anymore and point to it. So Salem has monumentally low standards for her that don't even believe in actual logic. He just knows that the world will go out of its way to make her miserable. Logic be damned. What an uplifting message to constantly have for a children's comic. The only way the spell would give her chicken legs is if she read a spell that was clearly talking about a chicken, and she wouldn't have bothered with it then. This story is stupid. She wouldn't need Salem's son do it. She'd just remember what her legs are supposed to look like and point at them. Wizards of Waverly Place had the dad of that show specifically say that magic was done after someone imagined something. And that stuck with me. I wish that show wasn't so boring. I can't watch the first 2 episodes again without fast-forwarding them. Specifically because they focus on boring mortal stuff. But even it was better than this. You need to establish magic to have actual consistent rules. The only rule for magic here is that it makes things confusingly difficult for Sabrina. How many times in this comic is Sabrina allowed to do good deeds with her magic that stick, instead of magic literally just making her life miserable? There is no reason that he wouldn't just move out of the way when she was apparently uncontrollably running towards him, somehow, and wait first before firing the spell off. He made her fall down the stairs because of his own idiocy. In the 70s cartoon and comic, we know that witches can reverse time, so there's no reason he wants reverse time to reverse this. This is just a needlessly cruel story. Everyone knows that healing magic, at least, is white magic, which is good. The story cuts past her being at the hospital, and Salem pushes her wheelchair through the park as he says that her aunts hadn't been that mad since the Salem witch trials. Why the fuck would they be mad instead of sad and horribly guilty of the fact that it was all their fault? Sabrina wouldn't have been driven to such desperate measures and gotten hurt if it wasn't for their decision not to heal her. That's about as bad as actually hurting her themselves, because Salem technically hurt her by magically bringing back her injured leg. Sabrina says that she deserved it for being impatient and disobeying. No, she didn't! What kind of fucked up message is that? If the writing was good, it wouldn't be expecting us to think Sabrina was right about this. This would be something that would be written to portray her as a victim of Stockholm Syndrome from abusive parents, and the story would end up with her being told that she does not deserve that. If she lived in the Dungeons & Dragons universe, there would be plenty of mages who would tell her, no, this is stupid, I'm just gonna heal you, and they can go screw off. Even when their horrible parenting skills get her sent to the hospital, she sides with them, and they still refuse to wake up and accept responsibility. Instead, they just blamed her. Even if she was wrong for it, she wouldn't have used the magic book if she was actually supervised. If even one person besides Salem was keeping her company, that wouldn't have happened. She did make things worse, but that's because 1, her aunts decided to keep the magic book in their house when they don't want her reading it, and in a place that she knows where it is, and 2, she doesn't know how to heal herself somehow because her aunts had stifled and discouraged her magic for years. Her being like this wouldn't be forced if her aunts weren't in the comic and she was only being raised by her mortal uncle Quigley. But even then, it would still make Quigley look abusive. How can I be expected to believe that actual witches are raising her to be against her own magic? It's not like they willingly gave up their own powers and are actively campaigning against magic, which would explain it better. She would have healed herself if she got hurt. Salem says about her aunts, well, at least they're not into corporal punishment anymore. He says that he remembers when they turned an embezzler they somehow met into a corporal in Custer's army. Custer? That name sounds familiar. Wasn't that associated with a certain really offensive computer game that the angry video game nerd reviewed? Suffice to say, Custer's a monster, so that adds an extra layer of over-the-topness. I can understand them forcing him to give it all to charity. That'd help people instead of just being mean to one person. They prefer to do this to an embezzler instead of heal somebody. They'd rather do something evil with their magic than do something good. At least if that was explained, there would be some consistent rules going on. Sabrina says that her aunts are supposedly being fair by forcing her to write an essay on her bad behavior. What bad behavior? How could she possibly write an essay on it? I didn't want to hate them. The most frustrating thing is sometimes they're not this bad. Oh, they're being nice because they're not as evil as they could be. A relatable protagonist would be just as furious as the audience. You'd think Salem would be just as furious as the audience. He's using magic to help her and encouraging her to use magic. You'd think that... But no, he somehow sides with her Aunt Sue. Salem says he's gonna abandon her while she writes her essay, because he didn't learn from keeping her unsupervised the first time, and because he wants to eat out of the dumpster with some cats rather than just zapping up food that doesn't smell terrible. I was fully expecting Sabrina to get injured again. This story would make me expect her to be in a full body cast by the end of it. If the orders of someone's parents keep them injured, they should call the police. If Sabrina's aunts learned the right lesson from Sabrina's fall down the stairs, then they would have supervised Sabrina here instead of leaving her alone with Salem again. Sabrina meets up with a girl who's never had the use of her legs, who's patient with her and shows her that she can't get up the stairs to visit a building. I really didn't expect Sabrina to be so stupid that she'd try to walk up the stairs like this. Miraculously, she falls back into her wheelchair and isn't injured again. She plans on writing them a stern letter. Sabrina could just use brainwashing to fix this problem. If every single place that wasn't wheelchair accessible could actually be made that way with one measly letter, then there wouldn't be places that weren't wheelchair accessible anymore. It's like putting the blame on us. Although if it did encourage people to do this and actually did make a difference, it's worth it. But if we're supposed to believe that this makes up for the horrible excuse for a story, then that is delusional. Why do we have to see her aunts again at the end? These are some of the worst fictional parents I've ever seen in my life. They have the definition of skewed priorities. A great fairy from a fountain would be a better aunt at that point. The story ends with Sabrina saying that she's writing a letter to the parks commissioner about installing ramps at all of their facilities. How is her composition really well written? She's just a stupid kid. The story had no chance whatsoever of being good with Sabrina as the protagonist. Even if Chloe or Harvey was the one in the wheelchair, and the only scene in the story after their injury was the one where they met that redhead, I'd still be questioning why Sabrina doesn't heal them. Because she could erase the memory of both Harvey and his parents to completely cover up him ever getting injured. This story just got my blood boiling. I better not be the only one pissed off at these people. This story's everything wrong with the animated series. You know it fails in a series about witches if you write a plot that can't possibly be good with witches as the protagonists. It wouldn't be so bad if it was firmly established from the start that witches in this universe aren't capable of using healing spells. They could explain that it's just too complicated to do because a witch wouldn't know how to imagine the inside of their leg being healed properly. Just the outside. Well, still, they could look up on the internet what the inside of a leg looks like. A witch would be able to imagine that she's not in pain from moving her leg, but that could just result in her leg still being injured and just becoming immune to pain. This reboot of the Sabrina comic is even worse than the Archie Sonic reboot. All that did, aside from the mandatory abandoning of plot threads, all that did was remove some characters that weren't handled well anymore. Give people some new outfits and change the names of settings. Most of those are just superficial problems. Names are just names, and the characters could change outfits without a reboot, and the redesigns generally weren't terrible. This was nothing but fundamental changes to the entire premise that weren't any good. It made the main character totally incompetent as its whole premise, added 3 new irredeemable main characters for no reason. That's never happened before in Sonic. And as a nitpick I can overlook, Salem has magic and can walk around for no good reason, when every spell he casts could be written to be by someone else. And Sabrina is better off not dating Harvey, but she doesn't date anyone else. That's like Sonic and Sally being just friends in the reboot. I don't want a story that makes me rant this much, but having writing as bad as this is distracting. I can't just move on to the next story if I'm too angry at the previous one to feel like it, because I don't feel like I'm finished with it. Nothing I can say is enough, and it's hard to want to move on with a comic this bad. The only thing comforting me is that I know that some people weren't happy with the animated series for having Sabrina be treated like she's younger and having to go to other people to cast spells. I at least know one critic called it out on that, so maybe it's known for being terrible. So it's not like with Flynn where I feel like everything he writes is overrated and ranting about it always makes me get seen as a bad guy. At least with this, there's some chance that this is the black sheep of the franchise, and most people won't be defending this crap. In the next story, we see Sabrina on a broomstick ride in the moonlight with the guy who says that he was too busy looking at her to notice. This is being nice to Sabrina, so it can't possibly be real. Also, the panel is shaped like a cloud on the edges, so it's probably a dream. It turns out she's just daydreaming about a lifeguard, which she's been staring at all morning since she went to the beach with Chloe. Sabrina could easily make this dream a reality with a love potion, but I guess she wants them to love her for real so it won't feel fake and be undeserved. Chloe asks her why she doesn't just go up to him and say hi. Sabrina says that she should know that if she wasn't too shy to say hi, she wouldn't be merely dreaming about him. Chloe tells her to splash around in the water and yell help so that he would rescue her. Well, no one else is in danger, so why not? Of course, what can go wrong does go wrong for Sabrina. So with her luck, the minute she'd do that, someone would be in danger for real and he'd be too busy saving her. But at least with this suggestion, Chloe's being kinda interesting again, by suggesting that she'd be deceitful to get what she wants. At least that wakes me up from the constant boredom of Sabrina always being expected to live up to her aunt's stringent moral code. But Salem should be doing this, so he'd have a consistent character. Sabrina says that's corny, and Chloe says that it's not, and it works every time a girl does it on TV. I can't blame her. I guess that's why Sabrina says this, because it might be a TV cliche. Sabrina lectures Chloe that it would be wrong to distract a lifeguard on duty. Oh, but using magic to make him notice her is just fine. Huh? Why can't she always be like this? That would be distracting him too. If the writer was gonna have Chloe make a morally selfish suggestion, couldn't she have encouraged her to use magic outright then? I like Chloe being a good person, but there's nothing wrong with her encouraging her to use magic for stuff that isn't evil. Now, if the story was keeping things simple and intuitive, Sabrina would literally just point and make the lifeguard pay attention to her. Of course, then she might feel guilty that he's looking at her instead of at the ocean where he should be, so she'd undo the spell. But that'd be keeping things simple. Instead, she zapped up a fancy kite, of all things. When the lifeguard isn't looking over there, he's looking at the ocean. He's supposed to be looking at the people swimming to do his job. This is the kind of disaster that would happen when she gets a crush on someone other than Harvey. So this plot could have easily not happened. It doesn't have to always end in disaster. Why should I even care if I know she's gonna fail? Why does she get rocketed into the sky? Well, I guess because the kite has a rocket on it. What took it so long then? The lifeguard tells her off for hang gliding around the beach. She gets pulled out over the ocean and the kite string breaks. I guess because of her weight and her not anticipating that she'd need to make the string tougher than that. Even though Sabrina was clearly about to fall on land, she ends up falling into the water. So the lifeguard saves her after all, and Sabrina thanks him. Chloe naturally wants an apology because Sabrina said her idea was corny when it worked. Sabrina says that as witches say, accidents will happen. Yeah, like every time she uses her magic. Is she gonna keep getting herself in trouble, real or not, to get his attention? Because that's the lesson she learned. He'd be better off not having to deal with that. Is this supposed to be about teaching the audience good lessons or not? In the comedy page, Sabrina wants Harvey to wait for her, and he says sorry and explains that he's just cruising by on a scooter and there's no way she can keep up. Sabrina doesn't know what to do for fun on her own because she won't give video games a chance. So she decides to use her broom as a scooter, which logically would just reveal magic to them. That's stupid. But at least her using magic overtly is more entertaining because we don't see it in real life. In the next story, Sabrina complains about her computer and it shoots a beam out of its monitor, teleporting an alien to her bedroom. Well, at least that woke me up. He says that he was passing through a galaxy in his ship when his conveniently amazing sensors detected a talking cat. He says that he miraculously has cats on his planet where the people don't look human. I guess that can make sense because the universe is infinitely massive, and so anything's possible everywhere. They should have said that in the story because if you didn't watch Rick and Morty, you'd be pretty confused here. What I don't get is why he went out of Sabrina's computer when he's an alien. This made me think he was a monster from the other realm. He wants to kidnap Salem to become famous. At least the story isn't boring and mundane. Then Salem says that he's not going anywhere, but he is. But it's his fault that the beam got reflected back at himself and he got zapped. Maybe if Salem hadn't warned him by talking so much and just warped him into a volcano right away, the rest of the plot wouldn't have happened. Couldn't he have frozen him in time and then sent Spooky after him? Salem could have brainwashed him into deciding not to bother him. The alien reveals that he has a force field to protect himself from his magic beam. If teleportation is real, the magic would instantly appear where the alien is. Why does Sabrina say catnap instead of kidnap at a time like this? After Sabrina asks Salem if he's okay and is reassured that he'll be fine once he gets to Planet Slug, Sabrina's shockingly smart for once with no time to prepare first, because she lies that Salem's the leader of her planet, and so if he's kidnapped, the alien would be in big trouble. Why does the alien think that's ridiculous and assume that Salem's just another weak Earthling like her? He doesn't know anything about Earth, so why would he not believe Sabrina? He's lucky he knows English. I guess he knows it because the Fate, who exists in the live-action show, were lazy and only programmed the aliens to know English, and that's it. I wish they explained that. Sabrina says that if the aliens take her and Salem on a ride in his spaceship, she'll prove how important Salem is. I have an easier time accepting an alien in the story than a weird-looking monster in the other realm, that's for sure. Because I'm being told that it's an alien. I'm not asking why it can't just be a witch, because it's not in the other realm. Sabrina gets in the spaceship, which the alien explains has a cloaking device around it. I love that this was explained. For once, that's a nice touch to the writing. So that's why no one will see the spaceship and freak out. Sabrina tells them to head for an island down below. What is so hard about her just teleporting him into the sun with pixie powder or freezing him in time? Maybe his force field is always around him. And I'm expected to believe her magic is always sent out in beam form. So she just gets Salem's bait if she used magic for this. She uses magic to make the Statue of Liberty look like Salem. I guess she'll undo this later to avoid people finding out and freaking out. Then she uses magic to make Salem's head a part of Mount Rushmore. So this story is about rewarding Sabrina for using her magic to solve a problem. I love this. But at this point, a story this good in this comic can't make me smile because I'm just sad that most of the stories aren't like this. And not to mention I'm still suspicious that the story will end up sucking after a crazy twist. But based on how it's going, I doubt it. I love that he says his planet has 12 moons. But it makes me wonder why life evolved on it then. Sabrina uses magic to make Salem's face show up on the moon, and this scares the alien into returning him to her home. I guess because he's afraid of the possibility of causing an army to go after him after a diplomatic incident. Sabrina's become so insecure from her aunt's guilting her over her own magic at this point, that she somehow thinks she was just lucky that her magic worked. And it's a shame that the story doesn't end with Sabrina's family congratulating her for saving Salem, which would give them a chance to admit that sometimes it's awesome for her to use her magic. It was a last resort though. Still, this shouldn't be rare. This kind of story needs to be standard. Out of context, if the rest of the comic hadn't angered me so much, I would feel like calling it fantastic. The first story was by Mike Gallagher, and this was the worst story he ever wrote. The whole plot happens because after Sabrina sprains her ankles playing sports, her aunts sociopathically refuse to even consider healing her, and keep smiling the entire time they're saying this. I better not be alone in hating this. This is child abuse. They're not doing all they can to help their injured child. That sums up the whole story right there. If these idiots met the white mages in Final Fantasy, they would think they don't live up to their standards. How this plot should have gone is that they should have gotten injured too and then healed themselves and then admitted that Sabrina was right and thrown her a party to cheer her up after healing her. And apologizing. Harvey should have been the ramp advocate. After the story spent the whole time pissing me off and treating Sabrina like she's solely in the wrong for wanting to heal herself, when the writer would want that too if he was in her position. And somehow she's stupid enough to fail. At that point, trying to have an uplifting message that Sabrina could sympathize with and want to advocate for people in wheelchairs was just out of place and cheesy. Completely lacking any awareness of how the audience was feeling at that point. With my luck, I bet a lot of people forgot about this because considering how common Sabrina being treated badly by her aunts is, it's normal at this point. This is just the most extreme example of magic being discouraged that I could find. After a forgettable cliche second story by Angelo, where Sabrina tries to get a lifeguard's attention with a rocket kite of all things, and falls in the ocean, which just makes her look selfish at other people's expense, and she never gets punished for it. The final story is about Sabrina awesomely saving Salem from an alien by making him think that he's the leader of the planet. She uses magic to make his image appear in 3 different places temporarily, so her magic saves the day. Thank you, but if it's that rare, it's too little too late. This story was kind of fantastic. There's still no reason Sabrina should have had to do that, because Salem would have just magically warped away the alien immediately, without talking first. We weren't told that the alien always has the force field against magic up, even before Salem threatened him. The alien should have pointed out that Salem was dressed like a house pet, and that's why he immediately assumed that she was lying about him being the leader, when he just got to her planet and has no idea who his actual leader is. But Sabrina's evidence was really convincing, and the alien probably concluded that on an alien planet that had Salem's face in a statue, the leader could wear whatever he wanted. I thought that we'd see his alien culture anyways, but that'd be creative. But if he's already visiting an alien planet with a talking cat that can make his face appear on his moon, maybe it's believable that he would overestimate how powerful Earth's army would be. I have no idea why Salem's zap hitting him merely froze him in time temporarily, when he talked as if he wanted to make the alien go somewhere. So you'd think that Salem would have been sent somewhere, or the beam, logically, would have done nothing. But that could have easily been written so that the alien shot Salem with a freeze ray and the plot would be the same. The only thing we know about the alien's home is that it has a dozen moons. That didn't make the development of sentient life impossible from the gravity of all of those moons pulling on the Earth. I guess the moons are really far away from the planet, so it's like it only has one moon.